Everyday injustice. Too many wrongful convictions. Corruption has infected the criminal justice system, leaving too many people helpless, fighting for their lives. Instead of receiving justice, people suffer. Is that why they say justice is blind?
Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Injustice Podcast. I'm your host, David Greenwald. For the past 10 years, we have operated Vanguard Court Watches in California, including San Francisco, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. Our goal? Expose everyday court injustices, and now, more broadly, shine a spotlight on injustices in the entire criminal justice system, in the form of wrongful convictions, police and prosecutorial misconduct, and mass incarceration. This podcast hopes to take it a step further and highlight criminal justice reform on a national level.
Everyday injustice.
Today on Everyday Injustice, we have Ashley Nellis from the Sentencing Project. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us briefly what you do at the Sentencing Project and how you got there.
Oh, sure. So I am a co-director of research at the organization, and the Sentencing Project's been around since the mid-1980s. And I've been with the organization for about 15 years. I lead our research and with my colleague Nazgul Gadnoush, and I have been working as an expert in the area of life imprisonment for a number of years, and also have a background in racial justice, in particular, racial justice regarding youth in the justice system.
So let's start here, because the Sentencing Project, whose work I really appreciate, just put out some papers about 50 years of incarceration. What have we learned over the last 50 years?
I think what we've learned is that we cannot incarcerate out of crime, and that we cannot use incarceration as the only tool in the toolbox to address crime and other social issues. So one of our fact sheets that just came out reminds everybody that we are unparalleled historically and internationally almost in terms of ranking in incarceration rates. And we have over 5 million people who are under some kind of supervision in the criminal legal system.
And a lot of people respond, well, isn't that kind of just because we have unparalleled crime rates in this country? How do you respond to that?
I respond by saying that our crime rates are a product of how prevalent our guns are in the United States and how easy it is to get a handgun. And so it's not an unsolvable problem that we have higher crime rates than other industrialized nations. We have much more access to handguns. We have a long history with racial suppression that other industrialized nations who have addressed these issues without prison don't have. And we have this sort of law and order mentality in the United States that is not conducive to having an effective criminal legal system.
And one of the stunning facts that I just pulled up is 1 in 7 people in U.S. prisons is serving some sort of a life sentence, either LWOP or life with parole or some kind of virtual life. 200,000 people. I think that's from a few years ago, but I'm sure the number hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, so I'm sure it hasn't either. That's from 2020. And at that point, it was nearly 204,000. So even if there was some improvement, it's very unlikely that 4,000 people have left, but it's possible. In any event, it's 1 in 7, which is about 15% of the US prison population. And what to me is so remarkable about that is that life imprisonment is a relatively, newly used tool. Even though we've always had the ability to give life imprisonment, the meaning of it has really changed during mass incarceration to mean, life means life. Whereas in earlier years and decades, and since the beginning of the US system, it really was more of an incentive to turn your behavior around. And most people were able to get out within 10 to 12 years and live a crime-free life.
And then another figure that just jumps out is 30% of lifers are 55 years old or more. And, why is that number so important? Because I think this is like the key to really understanding the problem with mass incarceration.
Right. We have a graying of the American prison population, to be sure, and a third of the lifers are already elderly and are going to die in prison because of the length of their sentence. It's important to keep in mind that there are countries that are that exclude elderly people from imprisonment because it is considered to be so inhumane. There are exorbitant costs associated with imprisoning people as they age toward their geriatric years. And all of that is wasted expense because people who are older are extremely unlikely to commit crime. So it's really an extremely punitive and retributive response to crime, whereas one that would allow some compassion and reasonability would, lower our prison population so that they were more manageable and also keep the public safe.
And I would be remiss not to point this out because it really caught my attention. Out here in California, we had 2 mass shootings, both of which were perpetrated by people in their late 60s, early 70s, which is unheard of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, those 2 crimes, first of all, to have 2 crimes back to back like that are seemingly unrelated, that are, identified as mass shootings is very unusual in and of itself. And then to have them both be committed by people who are 60 and older is also unusual because shootings are typically perpetrated by people who are younger. And then that they were Asian American as well. All of those are anomalies to the usual pattern of violent crime in America. And so I think it's important and I think the media has done a good job here of really covering how much these crimes were an anomaly, rather than suggesting, that there's some sort of new kind of, crime wave coming by the elderly or by Asian Americans or by Californians. This is just a very, sort of unusual turn of events.
And mass incarceration wouldn't have prevented either of these.
Right. Right. It's so and it doesn't, it doesn't prevent a lot of shootings because it doesn't address the root issue of why people engage in violent crime to begin with. And so it's a response, but it doesn't prevent. And what we really want to do, I think, as Americans, is we want to prevent killings, not just make sure that the people that commit the crimes, go away for life, but that we really truly turn lives around so that they don't engage in crimes to begin with.
And then one more kind of dive into the data. I mean, 1 in 5 Black men in prison are serving a life sentence. 2/3 of those serving life sentences are people of color. You can't talk about the criminal legal system without talking about race.
Yeah, it's really true. And, racial disparities are very evident from the point of one's first encounter with the police or lack thereof, and all the way through to, who gets the harshest sentences for similar crimes. So we see that, in any way that you look at the criminal justice system, you're going to see racial disparity. And I think it's, on people's minds lately because of the latest, police killing. And, but it's on people's minds who work in this field all the time, because if you go to any prison or jail, you are going to see a disproportionate share of Black people. And, I think that to some people, you really just need to see it to really understand the cruelty of it that is, placed on Black and Brown Americans.
So, those are the underlying facts. I guess the question is, what are we going to do about it? And specifically, what does the sentencing project hope to do about it?
Yeah, we hope to, do a lot of things about it, and we work, actively, to intervene and to redirect legislators into new ideas. And so, for one thing, we are trying to scale back long-term and life sentences drastically to, limit the use of them, to shorten sentences. And so we look at this entire exercise or project as what we call a second look. So looking at people somewhere down the line, 5 years, 10 years down the line, to see, is this the same person that was who it was when they first arrived at prison? We know just through adolescent development that if it's a young person, they're by definition not the same person. And so it's a real disservice to put somebody who's in their early 20s or late teens into prison and give them life or life without parole, and not take a look at who they are in 10 years, because developmentally they are going to be different because of just what we know about brain chemistry and brain development. So we also are very interested in taking a look at all of the ways in which somebody can get a life sentence. So many people are serving life for first-degree murder or second-degree murder, but some people are not. And, some people, even if they are there for a murder, were not the primary perpetrator of that murder. They were like a felony murder situation where they were participating in an underlying felony, but not at all involved or even aware about a homicide that happened as a result in that felony. So those kinds of laws that give people life sentences as if they were the primary perpetrator, to our mind, are unfair and they're disproportionate. They violate the very, basis of our criminal legal system, which is to be proportional to the crime. And we also are trying to, make inroads at ending racial disparity by defelonizing some felonies down to misdemeanors, those kinds of crimes that get somebody first involved in the criminal legal system, and that gives them a record, which makes them more likely to be given a harsher penalty for a subsequent crime. We see as unfair because white people don't have that initial record by and large, and so they don't have that. Even though they may have done a similar behavior. So we look at things like that. We're also involved in the federal level at trying to get President Biden to and the BOP to lower the prison population, the federal prison population, which continues to rise, even though the president promised that he would lower it. It's risen under his leadership. And we work on a variety of youth justice issues, trying to end the transfer of juveniles into the adult system and expand the use of alternatives to detention for young people.
So I want to break a few of these things down a little bit. So I know that under the founder of the Sentencing Project, Mark Maurer, there's been this kind of push for a 20-year sentencing limit. Is that something that's reasonable and could be safely implemented?
In our mind, yes. And we have been developing a number of strategies that could be used to bring sentences back to 20 years. But essentially what we envision is that if we are to cap at the top at 20 years, all the sentences beneath will naturally need to be reevaluated so that they're made more proportional, so that, a robbery doesn't end up with a 7-year sentence or a 10-year sentence, but ends up, as it is in other countries, with something more like a 2 to 3 year sentence. And that the time spent in incarceration for the person who needs incarceration would be worthwhile, not simply a warehousing situation. So that, as in Germany and some other, more advanced countries in this regard, the time in prison is spent preparing the person for release. That entire time is with an eye toward the day they're leaving. Whereas in the US, there's a scramble to get into programming all the time. There's long wait lists that, and there's programs that are closed off to people, except when they're about to leave, and then they can do programs. And that isn't the right way to go about it at all. So we need to, if we ease up the number of people in prison and the pressure on simply putting people in prison and redirect our attention to creating effective programs and interventions for people while they are incarcerated, we think that the entire system could then be recalibrated in a more reasonable and effective way.
And that's really a big problem because, you look at 60 to 70% recidivism rates, and then you look at our policies and you're like, of course we have high recidivism rates because we don't give them job skills. We don't give them education enough in prison. We don't have sufficient mental health programming and counseling and help. And then we put all these limits on people, right? They can't get jobs, and they're limited in public housing. And I mean, if we're going to make it impossible for somebody to succeed after being released, we couldn't design the system better probably than we already have.
Right. Yeah, it's set up to fail. And that is truly unfortunate. And you can see how people would consider our current incarceration system to be an extension of slavery, because it does seem from the way we treat people as they are incarcerated, like we don't want them to succeed. We only want them to come back. And when people do succeed, and many do, particularly the people who have been there a while, after they sort of overcome all of the obstacles of imprisonment and sort of adjust to their lot in life, the people who do succeed often do so in spite of the prison, not because of it.
Yeah, and I've been reading about how other countries handle their prison populations, and I mean, some of it's really stunning. And I forget which book I was reading, but somebody was visiting a prison. May have been in Germany, may have been in Sweden, but the reaction was, "Hey, Have you guys ever had a problem where somebody takes all these cooking supplies and uses it against the guards, and they're like, no, why would that happen?
Right.
And here we have everything so locked up and locked down that every little implement becomes dangerous.
Sure. Right. Yeah, no, it's really, really eye-opening to see the freedoms and the humanity that is retained for people who are incarcerated in other countries. They wear, street clothes, they have apartments. The focus is not on containment as much as it is betterment, and really addressing where things went wrong in their thinking. And in the US, you don't use real cutlery, you don't use real plates, you don't use real anything. And so when these people come out, if they've been in there a long time, there's quite a bit of trauma that they have to overcome. I've known several lifers who've come out and they eat off of paper plates for a good year because the adjustment is so challenging. They have trouble sleeping. There's just constant sort of PTSD symptoms from being incarcerated that's a whole nother thing that they need to overcome.
And are other countries just different than us, or are we just doing this wrong?
I think we're just doing this wrong, to be honest. I think, our policies and our crime policies are very fear-based. We're afraid, and they're certainly very race-based, and those overlap considerably. But to just take the fear ones, we are afraid that if we treat incarcerated people like human beings, they're going to take advantage of it and, kill us all. And that's just not, it couldn't be further from the truth. It is an extremely big hardship for somebody to go to jail or prison, just like it would be if you or I went to jail or prison. Perhaps you did go to jail or prison. I have no idea, but I haven't. And the amount to which that would interfere with my life is really substantial. And I think there's this, there's just this presumption that when people go to jail or prison, it makes no impact on their life that they had before. And that when they come out, there's nothing, there's just, there's no value to having them out. There's no value to supporting people when they come out.
So I can see people kind of pushing back on this idea, arguing, well, what do you do about the truly dangerous people?
Sure. There are truly dangerous people, for sure. There are certain people that are probably not going to get better because of some mental health issue, psychological break, or something like that. And I think, when you just, let's say, look at the long-termers and, there being 200,000 of them, it's difficult for me to think that there's 200,000 of these individuals, considering the fact that I've known several. So the numbers are just much smaller than what we've allowed them to be. And we have laws and policies in place that bring people into the system that haven't been, that are not the danger that we think they are. But our laws and policies are written in with such broad strokes that it's sort of up to the prosecutor generally how he or she wants to charge. And so this is a perfect example is a habitual offender statute, which is really up to prosecutors whether they want to use that. And there's quite a bit of evidence that shows that they're much more likely to use habitual offender statute on a Black person than a white person, and so the punishment gets more severe.
So is there a way to effectively weed out the people that are actually dangerous and then be able to figure out a better way to handle the people that aren't?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. I don't think I'm an expert on personalities. And, I know there are risk assessments that have their own set of issues. I also know that when a person is living in prison, there are correctional officers and guards and fellow prisoners who know that individual very well and could also, weigh in on the future dangerousness. But unfortunately, what happens is that if a person makes it to parole, for instance, a parole board, for instance, or some sort of review, that crime of conviction always is what carries the day. And that can be a real, that's a real problem, because you'd get no credit for how your life may have changed for the better since that crime of conviction, which is what prison should really be about. So it's like none of that time counts.
We're almost out of time here, but I was wondering if there were any upcoming projects or things that you're working on that you'd like to share with us.
Well, the Sentencing Project has launched now officially a campaign around the 50th anniversary, a grim anniversary as it is, of mass incarceration. So imprisonment numbers started to rise in the early 1970s, starting in 1973, and reached their peak unabated all those years, a 700% increase between that year and 2009, which is the period of years that we really refer to as the prison buildup. And then since that time until this year, and who knows what next year will bring, but there's been a small decline in the range of 2% a year. So my colleague Nazgul Ganoush in our office, she writes a terrific piece every year about how long it will take in order for us to get back to 1972 levels if we proceed at this rate. And if we proceed at this rate, it will take 75 years. So, we're trying to, really educate the public on the urgency of the issue and try to get, people involved and activated in their own jurisdictions to see how their particular state or county or prosecutor or whomever elected official is contributing to mass incarceration or is working toward ending it.
All right. Well, we'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I really love this topic.
Good.
Ashley Nellis from the Sentencing Project. And let me just ask you, if people want to learn more about the Sentencing Project, where can they go?
Our website is a great place. We're also on all the platforms, but our website is sentencingproject.org.
Great. This has been Everyday Injustice. I'm your host, David Greenwald. Join us again next time for more tales from the injustice system.
Thank you to George Powell and Norman Mousequake Barrett for the use of our opening, Everyday Injustice. You can see more of George's music at www.justiceforgeorgepowell.com. That's Justice for George Powell, all one word, .com.